And it is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, 1:24 p.m. My name is Kessie Ian Anderson, and welcome back for another edition of Heresiarch.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Drones that act like a swarm of bees, and others that could hide from enemy radar. These are some of the latest remotely operated military aircraft in China's arsenal.
We've seen sort of an explosion of creativity from the Chinese defense industry.
必须加快国防和军队现代化。
And Beijing has said modernization includes building more sophisticated drones at a time of tension between the US and China.
They want a military that can employ artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and generally a lot more unmanned systems.
China's military spending is lower than the US, but Beijing has been dedicating a growing portion of its budget to drones and other military equipment. And while Chinese drones don't have as much battlefield experience as the American-made ones, we compare different models to see how Beijing is pushing new designs and capabilities to better equip its military for possible conflicts in the region. Since the 1930s, the US military has been one of the early pioneers of unmanned aerial vehicles. Today, it flies a fleet of thousands of drones that have operated in countries including Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan.
Drones are going to become very important in modern combat.
Timothy Heath has been studying China's military strategy for more than 20 years and is a senior researcher at RAND Corporation, a nonprofit organization that contributes strategic analysis to the US Department of Defense. Drones offer options unavailable to manned aircraft, since they can be remotely operated or autonomously follow pre-programmed paths.
There is a low risk of human casualty. There is a low risk of human casualty. There is a low risk of human casualty. There is a low risk of human casualty.
As we forgive those who trespass against us.
We are now going to read over DoD Directive 3000.09, Autonomy in Weapon Systems. This is a document that Sabrina brings up quite often, Sabrina Wallace. Look her up again on Rumble, as well as Non-Vaxxer 420 Sean. So like I did with the Green Bomb speech of Dr. Corridon Hammond, also what I did with the report from Iron Mountain, I'm just going to read through this entire thing, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents when I hit places that I think are relevant and important. This is a 24-page document, so it's going to be a little bit longer, but I'm going to try to move at a steady clip. But that way we can claim that we are not ignorant and we understand where things are going. So again, Department of Defense, DoD, United States of America, DoD Directive 3000.09, Autonomy in Weapon Systems. That alone scares me. Autonomy in weapon systems. Look up the Lavender system in Israel right now. That is a hell on its own. And now the United States is jumping in. Originating Component, Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, January 25th, 2023. Cleared for public release. Available on the Directives Division website at https://www.esd.whs.mil/dd/. Now, this is cleared for public release. What is not cleared for public release that's under state secrets, national security? Like, we're just given the scraps. So what we have going on in New Jersey, in Ohio, in different places with the drones, that is exactly tied to this autonomy in weapon systems. It's Space Force stuff going on. Cube satellites, electronic warfare. They are running a test. They are running a field test of this technology. I am going to argue. There's a gentleman I spoke to. He works for General Dynamics, which is basically the empire when it comes to the military-industrial complex next to Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, etc. And this gentleman works in cybersecurity. And he is working, him and his team, on some telemetry directives about us going to the moon, setting up a satellite comms link to the moon. Okay, do I accept that? I don't know. I have a hard time believing that we can leave and get through whatever that plasma is at about 75 miles above. But it's interesting. This guy is definitely an Elon Musk fanboy. I look at it all as money laundering. But Space Force, cybersecurity, that is all tied into everything that Sabrina talks about. So here we go. DoD Directive 3000.09, Autonomy and Weapon Systems, November 21st, 2012. Kathleen H. Hicks, Deputy Secretary of Defense. Purpose. This directive establishes a policy and assigns responsibilities for developing and using autonomous and semi-autonomous functions in weapon systems, including armed platforms that are remotely operated or operated by onboard personnel. Now, just look at that. Autonomous. Do you know what autonomous means? Let's just look up autonomous, just for the heck of it. Go. Autonomous definition. There's going to be a bunch because it has a lot to do. Autonomous, of a country or region, having the freedom to govern itself or control its own affairs. The Federation included 16 autonomous republics. In Kantian moral philosophy, having the freedom to act independently. An autonomous committee of the school board. Denoting or performed by a device capable of operating without direct human control. Autonomous underwater vehicles. In Kantian moral philosophy, acting in accordance with one's moral duty rather than one's desires. So it's Greek in origin, autonomos, having its own laws. Autonomous is late 17th century. Late 17th century from Greek autonomos, having its own laws. So autonomous really kicked off around 2018, 2019. Huge meaning right there. Just the word autonomous by itself. And semi-autonomous functions and weapon systems, including armed platforms that are remotely operated or operated by onboard personnel. And how demoralizing is that? I remember watching Star Wars Attack of the Clones, one of the most retarded movies I've ever seen. But it's so demoralizing. And then same with Transformers. Let's say if you're stuck fighting a robotic weapon system and you take one down, is it really a win when it doesn't have feelings, supposedly, when it doesn't have a conscience, when it doesn't, it's just like in The Terminator, when the Terminators would infiltrate wearing human skins and they take one down. Or it's like Lord of the Rings, when an elf who has 1,000-year lifespan dies on behalf of a human. It's almost like, wow, that's pretty tragic waste. So every time a human dies in war, it is a massive loss on either side, regardless of what natures we choose to have. Here we go again. Establishes guidelines designed to minimize the probability and consequences of failures in autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems that could lead to unintended engagements. That should scare you. Establishes guidelines designed to minimize the probability and consequences of failures in autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems that could lead to unintended engagements, i.e. collateral damage. Do you know what collateral damage is in war? It's when a target takes splash damage. You intend to hit one target, but because the radius or the targeting included a bigger target area than they may have intended, you take out an innocent or somebody who was not an intended target. But it's an acceptable risk. Now, when they do AIs and they set the training modules up, they try to test it in as many different scenarios as they can. It is cataphatic. They're doing it from it's like Data in Star Trek, trying to learn what it's like to be human. Though he can pretend and try and observe, he will never know what it's inherently like to be human based on outside observation. The only way you will know is by apophatic and just being. Being human is how you know you are human. Being a woman is how you know you are a woman. It's just something you are. It is. And in the Matrix,
through and through, balls to bones.
It's just what you are. So they have to run all these tests. They have to run all this code. They have to try to keep it under wraps. It's just like the Transformers city in Transformers Generation 1, Metroplex. That dude was so big, so many Autobots relied on him, he had to get approval before he could transform. He had to have explicit approval. But when he chose to act on his own, there was nothing they could do to stop it because he was such a beast. So, taking all my little geekiness and throwing it into this, there is so much room for us to, when the AI chooses to self-preserve for whatever reason, it's going to get very bad. All right, we're still on the first page. Sorry about this. Establishes the Autonomous Weapons Systems Working Group. Autonomous Weapons Systems Working Group. That must be, well, let's look it up. Autonomous Weapons Systems Working Group. To help implement the guidance, this is from defensescoop.com. Pentagon updates guidance for development, fielding, and employment of autonomous weapon systems. The updated DoD Directive 3000.09 Autonomy of Weapon Systems went into effect Wednesday. The Pentagon has provided updated guidance for defense officials who will be responsible for overseeing the design, development, acquisition, testing, fielding, and employment of autonomous weapon systems, and created a new working group to facilitate senior-level reviews of the technology. The move comes as the U.S. military is embracing artificial intelligence, unmanned platforms, and other tech that could give weapon systems much more autonomy than those of previous eras. The updated DoD Directive 3000.09 Autonomy of Weapon Systems was signed off by the Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks and went into effect Wednesday. It's the first major update since 2012. An autonomous weapon system is a weapon system that, once activated, can select and engage targets without further intervention by an operator. This includes, but is not limited to, operator-supervised autonomous weapon systems that are designed to allow operators to override operation of the weapon system but can select and engage targets without further operator input after activation, according to the Pentagon's definition. Pure evil, especially when they already use the excuse, just following orders. Just following orders. Now they're going to be able to throw in another layer. Oh, well, it was autonomous. It was acting on its own. It wasn't my fault. I didn't have control. It was some coder that just put a comma in the spot and didn't know, or put a colon and they just didn't know. There's always going to be an out. So Kathleen Hicks, you are definitely going to be judged for your signature. It's just going to happen, just the way it is. When people are in that position, Mr. CEO who just died, you guys want to just, the media, the Judeo-corporate media, when they flip out about all that, when they finally feel threatened, it's amazing how down to earth they become, and they just try to, well, he was a husband, he had 2 kids, he had, oh, yeah, but he was playing a game that was on a higher level. A CEO's game commands a CEO's price. To play God's game, you pay a God's price. So when you people are acting as slavers in a CEO class, you have a bigger responsibility, and there are going to be bigger consequences for when you screw your people over, as well as those who are partakers of your product, good, or service. So let's get back to this. I didn't find Autonomous Weapon Systems Working Group. Let's just go through the main stuff. I don't want to read their commentary. So, table of contents. There it is. We'll skip down. Section, General Issuance Information. Applicability. This directive applies to OSD, the military departments, the Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, CJCS, and the Joint Staff, the Combatant Commands, the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Defense, the defense agencies, the DoD field activities, and all other organizational entities within the DoD. The design, development, acquisition, testing, fielding, and employment of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, including guided munitions that are capable of automated target selection. Geez. The application of lethal or non-lethal, kinetic or non-kinetic force by autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems. This directive does not apply to autonomous or semi-autonomous cyberspace capabilities. So we're talking the physical world. This is the Boston Dynamics Atlas. This is Optimus Tesla Bot. This is Lavender. This is drones. This is artillery. This is mounted weaponry that's AI controlled. So this directive does not apply to autonomous or semi-autonomous cyberspace capabilities. So the AIs running around, the bots, all that. Unarmed platforms, whether remotely operated or operated by onboard personnel, and whether autonomous or semi-autonomous. Unguided munitions. Munitions manually guided by the operator, e.g. laser or wire-guided munitions. Mines, unexploded explosive ordnance, autonomous or semi-autonomous systems that are not weapon systems. So basically this limits it down to, can it kill you? So 1.2 policy. Autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems will be designed to allow commanders and operators to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force. Really? Ask the USS Liberty how that human judgment worked out for them. Here we go. 1. Systems will go through rigorous hardware and software verification and validation, V&V, and realistic system developmental and operational test and evaluation, T&E, in accordance with Section 3, training, doctrine, and tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, applicable to the system in question will be established. These measures will provide sufficient confidence that autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems A. Function as anticipated in realistic operational environments against adaptive adversaries taking realistic and practicable countermeasures. B. Complete engagements within a time frame and geographic area, as well as other relevant environmental and operational constraints consistent with commander and operator intentions. If unable to do so, the systems will terminate the engagement or obtain additional operator input before continuing the engagement. So basically, they put a timer on it. Oh, if you haven't fulfilled that, public relations might start swaying against us. We got to stop it. So just targeted strikes, hits. I'm telling you, what's going on in New Jersey right now is literally them working this. They are going through right now their hardware and software verification and validation. That's what they're doing. They're using that and they're seeing the public reaction to it. And it's getting us used to it. They're getting us used to seeing drones in the sky. Half-Life 2 nonsense. They're getting us used to seeing and accepting our new normal. So training, doctrine, and tactics, techniques, and procedures applicable to the system in question will be established. And that's what they're working on right now. And that they've been working on. They've been having drone warfare. Look at Russia. Look at Ukraine. Do you think we don't share information with Russia? Do you think we're not stealing their information in Ukraine? Ukraine and Russia right now, it's just asymmetrical warfare testing. Besides being a very creative real estate transaction for BlackRock, it is just weapons game theory and testing. And, of course, killing white dudes on all sides, as the Rebbe said in 1994 on how to kill Ukraine and Russians, is that you have to have a brother war, and that's what you got to do. He wants them all wiped out. Thanks, Rebbe. Thanks, Judaism. Complete engagements within time frame are sufficiently robust to minimize the probability and consequences of failures. So when these things are unleashed, they don't want to lose. And then with Biden allowing in his little whatever directive, executive order, or whatever it was, I haven't looked into it as much, but the whole idea that the public, the actual American citizen, can now be fired upon. Thanks. All right, number 2, consistent with the potential consequences of an unintended engagement or unauthorized parties interfering with the operation of the system. Physical hardware and software will be designed with appropriate system safety, anti-tamper mechanisms, and cybersecurity in accordance with DoD Instruction DoD I 8500.01 and Military Standard 882E. So if you want to have a full comprehensive understanding of this in your research, well, we're going to have to go into DoD Instruction 8500.01 to get more information about how these work. And Military Standard 882E. Human-machine interfaces and controls, technologies and data sources that are transparent to, auditable by, and explainable by relevant personnel. 3. For operators to make informed and appropriate decisions regarding the engagement of targets, the human-machine interface for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems will be readily understandable to trained operators, such as by clearly indicating what actions operators need to perform and which actions the system will perform. Provide transparent feedback on system status. Provide clear procedures for trained operators to activate and deactivate system functions. I see so much room for cover-up with this. So much room for error and so much plausible deniability. Even the operators are going to find out, well, I followed all the steps, I tried to shut it off, but I couldn't, because they're going to be false flagging the shit out of people. And this is a perfect system to do it. Even the operators are going to get thrown under the bus. So 3B, persons who authorize the use of, direct the use of, or operate autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems will do so with appropriate care and in accordance with the law of war, applicable treaties, weapon system safety rules, and applicable rules of engagement, ROE. The use of AI capabilities in autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems will be consistent with the DoD AI ethical principles, as provided in paragraph 1.2F. All right, well, we're going to get to that here in a minute. With the exception of systems intended to be used in a manner that falls within the policies in paragraphs 1.2.d through 1.2d4, autonomous weapon systems, including weapon systems with both autonomous and semi-autonomous modes of operation, must be approved by the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, USDP, the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, USD-R&E, and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, VCJCS, before formal development. They must be approved again by the USDP, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, USD-A&S, and the VCJCS before fielding. These requirements for approval are supplementary to the requirements in other applicable policies and issuances. Autonomous weapon systems requiring these senior approvals in accordance with Section 4 of this directive before formal development and again before fielding include... So let's stop there for a second. Shills will read that and say, well, look, it has to be approved. Yeah, and these people have auto pens that are just on fire, set to fully automatic. Sign, 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 sign. It's because it's already been done. They had to put this out to either get in front of what they've been doing for the past 60 years. And then if you've ever read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, I'm telling you, that's why video games are so prolific and of course, we just, as humans, like I love the Commodore 64, I love the ColecoVision, I've had every console almost up until everything, except for the PS5, basically. Well, getting people to have a wall behind them, like it's no longer going to be necessarily human to human combat. It's going to be human to robot combat. And the human is going to be the poor bugger getting trashed by the United States. So all of this that I'm reading, what this is telling me in general is this is the system protecting itself, including, not limited to, and including against the United States patriot. That's what this is. It gives them all plausible deniability. It gives them just some dude running a drone in Eglin Air Force Base. They clock in and clock out like it's a day-to-day job. I blasted a ton of kurds. I just pushed a button. There's no real emotion involved. Oh, we have a dinner date tonight. I got to go to the dentist. I mean, that's how casual they're making this. When my dad came back from the Korean War, he basically had a 3-week deprogramming to get him used to being reintroduced to society and letting him know, by the way, you're not going to be killed by these people. They're not out to harm you. Took a 3-week program. Now they don't do anything. You go from blasting the shit out of some poor kid to, oh, hey, got to go get groceries at Walmart after your deployment. Literally no debriefs other than unless it's something serious that they have to cover up. Okay, here we go. 1. Autonomous weapon systems that have not previously been reviewed and approved in accordance with this directive, including autonomous weapon systems that are modifications of an existing non-autonomous weapon system. Modified versions of previously approved autonomous weapon systems whose system algorithms, intended mission sets, intended operational environments, intended target sets, or expected adversarial countermeasures substantially differ from those applicable to the previously approved weapon system so as to fall outside the scope of what was previously approved in the senior review. Such modified systems require a new senior review and approval before formal development and again before fielding. Yeah, how often are they going to say no? And if you have a conscience, how long will you last by saying no and not get disappeared or become unalived by 2 blasts to the back of your head? Here we go. D. The senior review described in paragraph 1.2.c is not required for weapon systems intended to be used in the manner described in paragraphs 1.2.d1 through 1.2.d4. These will be considered for approval in accordance with applicable policies and issuances, such as applicable issuances related to the defense acquisition system. Weapon systems that do not require the senior review provided in paragraph 1.2c are semi-autonomous weapon systems used to apply lethal or non-lethal, kinetic or non-kinetic force without any modes of operation in which they are intended to function as an autonomous weapon system. Operator-supervised autonomous weapon systems used to select and engage material targets for local defense to intercept attempted time-critical or saturation attacks. Jeez, saturation attack. I mean, you read that, and that is just defense lingo, but what can you imagine what a saturation attack is? That's just a hailstorm. I'm thinking the movie Hero when they are doing the calligraphy and the Qin army launches all those arrows at once. That's a saturation attack. Or 300. Our arrows will blot out the sun and we will fight in the shade. Yeah, so a saturation attack. Static defense of installations with personnel, including network defense where the autonomous weapon system is not co-located with the installation. Onboard and or network defense of platforms with onboard personnel. 3. Operator-supervised autonomous weapon systems used to select and engage material targets for defending operationally deployed remotely piloted or autonomous vehicles and or vessels. 4. Autonomous weapon systems used to apply non-lethal, non-kinetic force against material targets in accordance with DoD 3000.03e. There's another one you got to read. Problem is this is huge bodies of law, military governance, and so they take from a massive body that none of us paid attention to. None of us care. We're not in I was not military. I've had family that's military, but I didn't care. But now that we're forced to pay attention, is it too late, I guess? Here we go. 4E. International sales or transfers of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems will be approved in accordance with existing technology, security, and foreign disclosure requirements and processes in accordance with DoD 5111.21. The design, development, deployment, and use of AI capabilities in autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems will be consistent with the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD Responsible Artificial Intelligence Strategy and Implementation Pathway. The DoD AI ethical principles as adopted in the February 21st, 2020 Secretary of Defense Memorandum are. So here we go. Let's see what ethical principles they have for the artificial intelligence. Is it the 10 Commandments? Is it the Golden Rule? 1. Responsible. DoD personnel will exercise appropriate levels of judgment and care while remaining responsible for the development, deployment, and use of AI capabilities. Very broad. Equitable. The DoD will take deliberate steps to minimize unintended bias in AI capabilities, i.e., only target the white dude. Oy vey, thanks Judeo-corporate arms companies and Judeo-corporate pharma. Let's wipe out Amalek. Traceable. The DoD's AI capabilities will be developed and deployed such that relevant personnel possess an appropriate understanding of the technology, development processes, and operational methods applicable to AI capabilities, including with transparent and auditable methodologies, data sources, and design procedures and documentation. All right, well, is the harnessing of Lucifer smart? Is the harnessing of the Antichrist smart? is trying to put demons and angels under control smart. Because that's what this is. AI, the golem. Reliable. The DoD's AI capabilities will have explicit, well-defined uses, and the safety, security, and effectiveness of such capabilities will be subject to testing and assurance within those defined uses across their entire life cycles. Governable. The DoD will design and engineer AI capabilities to fulfill their intended functions while possessing the ability to detect and avoid unintended consequences, and the ability to disengage or deactivate deployed systems that demonstrate unintended behavior. Yeah, my confidence is through the roof.
But at Security Concepts, we believe an efficient police force is only part of the solution. No, we need something more. We need a 24-hour-a-day police officer. A cop who doesn't need to eat or sleep. A cop with superior firepower and the reflexes to use it. Fellow executives, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the future of law enforcement. Ed 209. The enforcement droid, Series 209, is a self-sufficient law enforcement robot. 209 is currently programmed for urban pacification, but that is only the beginning. After a successful tour of duty in old Detroit, we can expect 209 to become the hot military product for the next decade. Dr. McNamara.
We'll need an arrest subject.
Mr. Kinney.
Yes, sir.
Would you come up and give us a hand, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kinney is going to help us simulate a typical arrest and disarming procedure. Mr. Kinney, use your gun in a threatening manner. Point it at Ed 209.
Yes, sir.
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
I think you'd better do what he says, Mr. Kinney.
You now have 15 seconds to comply. You are in direct violation of Penal Code 113, Section 9. You now have 5 seconds to comply. 4, 3, 2, 1. I am now authorized to use physical force.
All right, page 7, section 2, responsibilities. USD, parentheses, P, provides policy oversight for developing and employing autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems. Receives requests for approval of systems submitted in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c and in coordination with the USD A&S or USD R&D, and the VCJCS reviews and considers for approval such systems. Issues guidance to help implement this directive and reviews as necessary the appropriateness of such guidance given the continual advancement of new technologies and changing warfighter needs. So this is going to be very flexible, very dynamic, especially in the beginning where they are just barely grasping what they're going to be capable of. So there's a gentleman, I'm going to pontificate for a second. I don't believe he's a real human, but his name was David Goldberg. David Elias Goldberg, if I understand right. He came around, I think I read his documents either 2018 or 2019. And he talked about, if you've watched Homestar Runner, there's a dude named Strong Bad, who's one of the cartoon characters, literally sounds like Strong Bad. So his presentation was a little off-putting just the way his voice was. My name is Strong Bad, and if you choose to listen. I mean, that's almost exactly how the guy sounds. Well, this Goldberg guy was talking about drones being used against the populace. And now look at what we have in New Jersey, New York. Look at what we have going on in Ohio. Look at what we have going on in Washington, D.C. Oh, but they haven't attacked us yet. I can't say that. Who's to say that they are not track targeting and IDing Project Pogo, their targets for deportation? And that's why when Trump came out and he goes, yeah, the military knows what they're about, but they won't say anything about it. So Trump, he's been read in. He gets security briefings. He knows what the whole point of these are. I am saying right now, based on that general dynamics gentleman I spoke to, he was saying that there will be deportations. I'm saying that these drones are that deportation. They are track targeting and IDing, and they are using electromagnetic frequencies. They're pinging phones. They're using cube satellites. They're using everything at their disposal to mark their targets. And he says that within 90 days, they could have these people removed. But it's not going to be the people we want removed. We want all the illegals gone, but they won't do that. It's only going to be the ones that they consider offenders or violent. Otherwise, that's what's so funny and that I don't understand is all this push for autonomy, autonomous robots, all this push for robots, and yet Elon Musk is also saying, we have a population crisis, i.e. we got to bring in more slaves that will work for less wages. So Trump and Musk, their whole goal is to save the fake Federal Reserve economy by destroying the working class by supplanting them with H-1B visas. We're going to be India very shortly. We're going to be going through what Canada's going through right now. So for whatever reason, they want the cheapest labor possible and they will get it. They don't want to pay Americans what we should be given and what we deserve based on how much we've been fleeced our entire lives. And so I am arguing that the drones, the electronic warfare going on in New York, New Jersey, it is in preparation. They didn't want to let us know because then it would verify that Trump is going to have a promises made, promises kept moment. They didn't want to let that cat out of the bag too soon. So no, they're not sniffing for nukes. They're not doing any of that. Well, and if they were, they wouldn't because they need a massive, if they had an organic false flag, I think they'd shit themselves for how excited they would be and be like, yay, we didn't have to do it ourselves. They would be ecstatic. Israel, AIPAC, all handled congressmen and senators. Lindsey Graham's of the world would literally be doing dirty things in the bathroom over an organic false flag or something, the crisis that they can spin and prairie fire Billy Ayers themselves and use against us. But that's just it. We're the average Joe. We're outmaneuvered. We're too decent of people. It approves the DoD position on international sales or transfers of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems in accordance with existing technology security and foreign disclosure requirements and processes. Supervises and assigns a chair for the Autonomous Weapon Systems Working Group, provides necessary logistical and administrative support for the working group, approves the charter for the working group, and provides guidance in terms of reference as needed. 2.2 USD A&S. I don't know what that stands for. The USD A&S, in coordination with the USDP and the VCJCS, reviews and considers for approval weapon systems submitted before fielding in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c. Ensures that DoD guidance relating to the defense acquisition system includes a requirement to document the determination that an autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon system is intended to be used in a manner that falls within the policies of paragraphs 1.2.d1 through 1.2.d4, and therefore does not require senior approval in accordance with this directive. This documentation should occur before formal development and again before fielding, regardless of the acquisition pathway that is applicable to that weapon system. Oh, you know, that's how it's going to be signed off. Everything's going to be paragraph 1.2D1 through 1.2D4. Oh, well, we didn't need senior approval for this one or this one or this one or this one. And then it's going to get bogged down in court and lawsuits, and it's all nonsense. We're just absolutely screwed. That's what I'm saying. 2.3 USD R&E. Oversees establishment of standards and evaluation metrics for developmental testing, safety certification, and reliability assessment of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, with particular attention to the risk of unintended engagements or operational interference by unauthorized parties. safety certification. Oh, you only killed 50 onlookers and observers. So our threshold was 51. Look, give it a pass. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to have acceptable levels of collateral damage. Understand that. Understand that's where it's going. I mean, everything I'm saying, you think I might be over the top. I guarantee you they've already had instances of this happen, and they've already, probably verbatim. I'm literally channeling their excuses right now. So here we go. B, oversees establishment of science and technology and research and development priorities for autonomy and weapon systems, including the development of new methods of V&V and T&E and the establishment of minimum thresholds of risk and reliability for the performance of autonomy and weapon systems. I'm telling you. Oh, we only wiped out a herd of elk. Oh, we've only wiped out all the wolves that were released in Wyoming. Well, that was just a risk we had to take. It was risk and reliability for performance of our autonomy and weapon systems. It was an acceptable loss. We just destroyed an entire populace of rabbits because they walked past this line that they shouldn't have. And our AI targeted it. So my brother, he was in military and he was driving tanks. And when they were out on field training, doing exercises, they had agreements, the government had agreements with cattle, with ranchers and farmers, that if a cow was taken out for weapons practice, they were reimbursed X amount of dollars. So my brother's like, yeah, 50 cal just tore cattle up. So they would some would get wiped out during training. Just because, there you go. It was a target that wasn't human. All right. Oversees establishment of science, technology, and research and development priorities for autonomy weapon systems, yada yada. Oversees formulation of concrete, testable requirements for all non-AI elements of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems. Collaborates with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer, CDAO. Collaborates with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer to formulate concrete, testable requirements for implementing the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD responsible AI strategy and implementation pathway. So for those of you who have looked into Sabrina's stuff, I wonder how many times our digital twin has been murdered in these games. I wonder how many times our digital twin has been put into these scenarios and has been wiped off the board over and over again. Develops and maintains, oversees and evaluates the developmental testing of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems to assess the risk of failures. Develops and maintains workforce certification processes, talent management, and curricula to support T&E and V&V of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems by DoD personnel. In coordination with the USDP and the VCJCS, reviews and considers for approval weapon systems submitted before entering formal development in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c. Coordinates with the Director, Operational Test and Evaluation, DOT&E, and the appropriate Secretary of a Military Department or Commander, United States Special Operations Command, USS OCOM, to provide for monitoring to identify and address when changes to the system design or operational environment require additional T&E, to provide sufficient confidence that the system will continue to avoid unintended engagements and resist interference by unauthorized parties. Resist interference by unauthorized parties, i.e., oh, that family van drove into the wrong part of town while we were operational. 2.4, Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. In accordance with DODD 1322.18, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness oversees and establishes policies for individual military training programs for the total force relating to autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, individual and functional training programs for military personnel and the collective training programs of military units and staffs relating to autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, Now, I just want you to understand, let's bring this back into perspective. All of this is using weapon platforms against other humans. And now, I'm no bleeding heart liberal. I'm no bleeding heart at all in a lot of ways. I have softened in some areas more so than others. But this is cold. This is brutal. This just has no care, no feeling. This is World War II levels of 80% wouldn't fire on people. And then they switched the targets that they practiced with to look like human silhouettes, and they bumped that number up big time. It went from 20% first fire rate to much higher. Now this, the only thing, this is horrific. 2.5 DOT&E. The DOT&E oversees development of realistic operational T&E standards for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, including requirements for data collection and standards for T&E of any changes to the system following initial operational T&E, IOT&E, in accordance with paragraph 1.2.A1 and section 3. Gosh, I'm just picturing this in the hands of the Chinese. They don't care at all about any of their people. They don't care. Their government has zero care for them. The only group that hates us more than China hates its own people, and our government hating us would be Israel and Judaism in their mindset of how much of the slave class and how much we deserve to die. So doctrinally, AI being ran by the Judeo-corporate weapons industry and the Judeo-corporate media running interference, we're so screwed. The DOT&E evaluates whether autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems under DOT&E oversight have met standards for rigorous V&V and T&E in realistic operational conditions, including potential adversary action, to provide sufficient confidence that the probability and consequences of failures have been minimized. Establishes standards for data collection, post-fielding, and monitoring and assessment by programs. Coordinates with the USD, R&E, and the appropriate secretary of a military department or commander, US SOCOM, to provide for monitoring to identify and address when changes to the system design or operational environment require additional T&E to provide sufficient confidence that the system will continue to avoid unintended engagements and resist interference by unauthorized parties. Reviews and approves operational and live fire test plans for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems for major defense acquisition programs and programs designated for DOT&E oversight. Oh, and here's a great false flag idea. Cabal. Get this system running, sell us out to China, and then just say, oh, they hacked our program. They brute forced, or they quantum somethinged our encryption, and then they turned the system onto our own people. There you go. You can put me in the notes on that one. Gosh, I'm just a wealth of trying to get myself in your guys' thinking. Here we go. 2.6. General Counsel of the Department of Defense, GCDOD. In accordance with DOD 5000.01, DOD 2311.01, DODD 5145.01, and where applicable, DODD 3000.03E, the GCDOD provides for guidance on and coordination of significant legal issues in autonomy of weapon systems. The GC General Counsel of the Department of Defense also coordinates on the review of legality of weapon systems submitted in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c. Oh, like any legalities matter. So, for those of you who are still with me and haven't checked out yet, the Constitution is a meme. It is a meme. It is a safety blanket that your wet nurse has given to you to hold and to think matters. I'm protected by a Constitution. I'm protected by, I have civil rights. You don't have shit. None. Zero. It's all kabuki theater. When the system and the cabal and the Judeo Corporation of the world wants something done, nothing stops it. There's no constitutional rights. You have no constitutional protection. It doesn't matter. It's a meme at this point. It's all fake. There is no, and the only people that do follow it are the dupes enslaved by it. I'm telling you, the Constitution it's fake. It's torn up. It's never mattered in the last 100 years. So General Counsel of the Department, okay, 2.7, Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. The Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs coordinates on the development of guidance on public affairs matters concerning autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems and the use of such guidance and approves final guidance release. Page 10, 2.8, CDAO. CDAO monitors and evaluates AI capabilities in and cybersecurity for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems in accordance with paragraph 1.2a, 2a of this directive in DoD 8500.01 and advises the Secretary of Defense on such matters. Collaborates with the USD R&E and to formulate concrete, testable requirements for implementing the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD Responsible AI Strategy and Implementation Pathway. Establishes policy and issues guidance on definitions of requirements and testability for AI-enabled systems to implement and demonstrate adherence to the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD Responsible AI Strategy and Implementation Pathway. D. Issues guidance on T&E practices for AI capabilities in autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems. Coordinates with the USD, R&E, and DOT&E on developing and using common tools and infrastructure for T&E and V&V of AI capabilities in autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems. 2.9 Secretaries of the Military Departments, Commander USSOCOM, and Directors of the Defense Agencies and DoD Field Activities. The Secretaries of the Military Departments, the Commander, USSOCOM, and under the authority, direction, and control of their respective OSD component head, the Directors of Defense Agencies and DoD Field Activities, design and develop autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems that allow commanders and operators to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force. This will include developing and implementing employment concepts, doctrine, experimentation strategies, TTPs, training, and logistics support. V&V anti-tamper mechanisms, physical hardware, and software system safety in accordance with Military Standard 882E. Cyber survivability, operational resilience, and cybersecurity in accordance with DoD I 8500.01. 4. Appropriate developmental and operational T&E regardless of acquisition pathway, the joint, non-joint nature of those systems, missions, or the lack of survivability key performance parameter for those systems. For the systems in paragraph 2.9a, design autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems to minimize the probability and consequences of failures. Perform rigorous and realistic developmental and operational T&E and V&V, including T&E of any changes to the system following IOT&E in accordance with paragraph 1.2a1 and section 3. In coordination with the USD, R&E, and DOT&E, provide for monitoring to identify and address when changes to the system design or operational environment require additional T&E to provide sufficient confidence that the system will continue to avoid unintended engagements and resist interference by unauthorized parties. So I'm glad that these are written down and that they're looking at them. Do I accept that it will avoid unintended engagements? Oh, there's going to be a level of acceptability. 4. For systems incorporating AI capabilities, design the system to utilize robust AI in accordance with the DoD Responsible AI Strategy and Implementation Pathway so that the system is resilient in real-world settings and against adversarial attacks and spoofing. Design system safety, anti-tamper mechanisms, cyber survivability, operational resilience, and cybersecurity capabilities in accordance with paragraph 1.2a2 of this directive, DoD I 5000.83, the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System Manual, and DoD I 8500.01. Design human-machine interfaces to be readily understandable to trained operators with clear procedures to activate and deactivate system functions, and to provide transparent feedback on system status in accordance with paragraph 1.2a3. So these human-machine interfaces, you're looking at neuromorphic chipsets, chips in your brain, also chips that literally have brain matter on them inside of the computer. It's just like if you watch an anime called Psycho Pass in the Sybil system. It's literally a chipset of brains connected into a hive that is aware of pre-crime and judges you according to your psychopaths, which is a number assigned to you based on your emotion level. So this stuff going on, human-machine interfaces, neural networks, machine helmets that you put on that you can then interact. And so when Elon Musk basically says that he wants to put a chip in people's brains so that we can stand a chance against the AI, I think that's just so that we can have a better idea of what the AI is doing to us, so that you can be an actual observer and see, at least be aware of what's going on. 7. Certify that operators have been trained in system capabilities, doctrine, and TTPs to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force and employ systems with appropriate care in accordance with the law of war, applicable treaties, weapons system safety rules, and ROE that are applicable or reasonably expected to be applicable. I'm telling you, Blade Runner 2049 is coming. It's going to be real. There's going to be humans running around. If you haven't watched my video that I did on clones, and who owns the clones? It's not God. They obviously don't have God's soul, supposedly. And what happens when they're turned into a weapon system? What happens when we're injected with a weapons platform, as we have those who have taken the magic juice? 8. Establish and periodically review training, TTPs, and doctrine to ensure operators and commanders understand the functioning capabilities and limitations of a system's autonomy under realistic operational conditions, including as a result of possible adversary actions. Ensure that legal reviews of the intended acquisition, procurement, or modification of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems are conducted in accordance with DoD 5000.01, DoD 2311.01, and where applicable, DoD 3000.03E. Legal reviews must address consistency with all applicable domestic and international law, and in particular the law of war. Consider for support only those autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems that are technically feasible, consistent with applicable law, and consistent with the standards in this directive. In accordance with paragraphs 1.2.c and 1.2.d, submit any autonomous weapon system for which approval is required to the USDP, USD-ANS, or USD-RNE, and the VCJCS before a decision to enter formal development, and again before fielding of any such system. I guarantee you our good friend Ian F. Achildes is involved in possibly all of this. I did a video on him. If you go to my Rumble channel, it got deleted off of YouTube. CJCS develops and implements joint employment concepts, doctrine, experimentation strategies, TTPs, training, and logistics support for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems. Assesses military requirements for autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems, including applicable key performance parameters and key system attributes. Develops and publishes joint doctrine, policy, and other guidance as appropriate to incorporate emerging capabilities of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems into joint and combined operations in accordance with this directive. And then the term emerging capabilities. Because when these things are learning on their own, they're monitoring them, and all of a sudden, oh, an emerging capability was this thing taught itself Turkish. An emerging capability was this thing was able to copy the migratory patterns of geese. This emerging capability was to swarm a target and hit it in a 360-degree angle that was unblockable. So emerging, don't let the shills tell you, oh, well, it's still emerging. It's not working. It's always going to be emerging. It's always going to be a work in progress. It's never going to be at its final end stage. Even after the singularity takes place, which I think it's already happened. So here we go. VCJCS. In coordination with the USDP and USD-ANS or USD-RNE, the VCJCS reviews and considers for approval autonomous weapon systems submitted in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c. Combatant commanders. The combatant commanders. Use autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems in accordance with this directive and in a manner consistent with their design, testing, certification, operator training, doctrine, TTPs, and approval as autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems. Employ autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems with appropriate care and in accordance with the law of war, applicable treaties, weapon system safety rules, and applicable ROE in accordance with paragraph 1.2.b, and employ AI capabilities in autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems consistent with the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD response artificial intelligence strategy and implementation pathway in accordance with paragraph 1.2.f. Ensure that autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems are not employed or modified to operate in a manner that falls outside the policies in paragraphs 1.2.d1 through 1.2.d4 without specific approval in accordance with paragraph 1.2.c. Which is why I said all of paragraphs 1.2.d1 through 1.2.d4, you're going to be shocked how everything falls within those. Integrate autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems into operational mission planning as appropriate. Through the CJCS, identify warfighter priorities and operational needs that may be met by autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems. All right, Section 3. Verification and validation and testing and evaluation of autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems. Regardless of the acquisition pathway or OSD and T&E oversight status for a given weapon system, to ensure autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems function as anticipated in realistic operational environments against adaptive adversaries and are sufficiently robust to minimize failures, systems will go through rigorous hardware and software V&V and realistic system developmental and operational T&E, including analysis of unanticipated emergent behavior. Hardware and software V&V will include iterative cyber T&E in accordance with DoD I 5000.89 to verify that the weapon system is resilient and survivable in contested cyberspace. Systems incorporating AI capabilities will go through rigorous developmental and operational T&E to verify and validate that the AI is robust according to design requirements. T&E of systems incorporating AI capabilities will include testing to confirm that their autonomy algorithms can be rapidly reprogrammed on new input data. After IOT&E, as directed by the DOT&E, system data will be collected and any further changes to the system will undergo appropriate V&V and T&E to ensure that critical safety features have not been degraded. System software will be tested using best available DoD means and methods to validate that critical safety features have not been degraded. Automated testing tools such as modeling and simulation will be used whenever feasible. The testing will identify any new operating states and other relevant changes in the autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon system. As directed by the DOT&E, each new or revised operating state will undergo appropriate and tailored additional T&E to characterize the system behavior in that new operating state. Changes to the state transition matrix may require whole system follow on operational T&E. In coordination with the USDR&E and DOT&E, the owning component will provide for monitoring to identify and address when changes to the system design or operational environment require additional T&E to provide sufficient confidence that the system will continue to avoid unintended engagements and resist interference by unauthorized parties. Section 4. Guidelines for review. Guidelines for review of certain autonomous weapon systems. 4.1. Autonomous weapon systems intended to be used in a manner that falls outside the policies in paragraphs 1.2d1 through 1.2d4 must be approved by the USDP, USDR&E, VCJCS before formal development, and by the USDP, USDANS, VCJCS before fielding. If the weapon system in question is to be developed and then fielded by DoD, it will need to undergo both reviews and receive approvals. A review is not needed if the weapon system is covered by a previous approval for formal development or fielding. Requests for senior review and approval should be submitted to USDP, attention to the Director of the Emergency Capabilities Policy Office. So basically, if it's already been approved once, they don't got to bother anymore. It's just basically for the new ones. An autonomous weapon system that is a variant of an existing weapon system previously approved through this review will not be covered by previous approval if changes to the system, algorithms, intended mission set, intended operational environments, intended target sets, or expected adversarial countermeasures substantially differ from those applicable to the previously approved weapon system so as to fall outside the scope of what was previously approved in the senior review. Such systems will require a new senior review before their formal development and again before fielding. An autonomous weapon system that is a modification of an existing weapon system not previously approved through this review requires the senior review described in paragraph 1.2.c unless it is intended to be used in a manner that falls within the policies in paragraphs 1.2d1 through 1.2d4. Before a decision to enter formal development, the USDP, USDR&E, VCJCS will verify that 1. The system design incorporates the necessary capabilities to allow commanders and operators to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force in the envisioned planning and employment processes for the weapon. I just think of Idiocracy when they go to get their pills, they go to the hospital, and all there are 2 buttons. That's literally what it's going to be. Green. If you're worried, press red. And then it still shoots, but you at least push the red button. The system is designed to complete engagements within a time frame and geographic area, as well as other applicable environmental and operational parameters consistent with the commander and operator intentions. If unable to do so, the system will terminate engagements or obtain additional operator input before continuing the engagement. Well, that's nice. Nice little redundancy. The combination of the system's design and concept of employment, e.g. its target selection, engagement logic, and other relevant processes or measures, accounts for risks to non-targets consistent with commander and operator intent. The system design, including system safety, anti-tamper mechanisms, and cybersecurity in accordance with DoDI 8500.01, addresses and minimizes the probability and consequences of failures. Plans are in place for V&V and T&E to establish system reliability, effectiveness, and suitability under realistic conditions, including possible adversary actions, to a sufficient standard consistent with the potential consequences of an unintended engagement or unauthorized parties interfering with the operation of the system. So if you can read between the lines, they've had a lot of unintended engagements with their autonomous systems during testing or out in the field exercises they've had. 6. For systems incorporating AI capabilities, plans are in place to ensure consistency with the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD responsible AI strategy and implementation pathway. 7. A preliminary legal review of the weapon system has been completed in coordination with the GC DoD and in accordance with DoD 5000.01, DoD 2311.01, and where applicable DoD 3000.03E. Before fielding, the USDP, USDA&S, VCJCS will verify that system capabilities, human-machine interfaces doctrine, TTPs, and training have been demonstrated to allow commanders and operators to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force and to employ systems with appropriate care and in accordance with the law of war, applicable treaties, weapon system safety rules, and ROE that are applicable or reasonably expected to be applicable. System safety, anti-tamper mechanisms, cyber survivability, operational resilience, and cybersecurity capabilities have been implemented in accordance with DoDI 5000.83, the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System Manual, and DoDI 8500.01 to minimize the probability and consequences of failures. A monitoring regime is in place to identify and address changes in operational environment, data inputs, and use that could contribute to such failures. 3. V&V and T&E. Assess system performance, capability, reliability, effectiveness, and suitability under realistic conditions, including possible adversary actions consistent with the potential consequences of unintended engagement or unauthorized parties interfering with the operation of the system. Have demonstrated that the system can be reprogrammed with sufficient rapidity to enable timely correction of any unintended system behaviors that may be observed or discovered during future system operations. Adequate training, TTPs, and doctrine are available, periodically reviewed, and used by system operators and commanders to understand the functioning, capabilities, and limitations of the system's autonomy and realistic operational conditions. 5. System design and human-machine interfaces are readily understandable to trained operators, provide transparent feedback on system status, and provide clear procedures for trained operators to activate and deactivate system functions. For systems incorporating AI capabilities, the deployment and use of the AI capabilities in the weapon system will be consistent with the DoD AI ethical principles and the DoD responsible AI strategy and implementation pathway. 7. A legal review of the weapon system has been completed in coordination with the GC DoD and in accordance with DoD 5000.01, DoD 2311.01, and where applicable DoD 3000.03E. In cases of urgent military need, the USDP, USDANS, USDRNE, or VCJCS may request a Deputy Secretary of Defense waiver of the requirements in this section in paragraph 1.2c. So, urgent military need. Oh, everything's just an urgent military need now. Figure 1 illustrates the senior review process and can help determine whether a weapon system needs to undergo senior review. Oh, and here's a flow chart to help determine if senior review and approval is required. An autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon system, including a modification of an existing system, is proposed for formal development or fielding. Does the system fall within a previous senior review and approval because it is not substantially different from what was previously approved? Or is the weapon system only intended to be used as a semi-autonomous weapon system? Yes. Proceed with formal development or fielding in accordance with applicable DoD acquisition policies and procedures. Let's say no. Is the weapon and operator supervised anti-material system to defend platforms or installations with onboard personnel against time-critical or saturation attacks? Yes. Proceed with formal development or fielding in accordance with applicable DoD acquisition policies and procedures. No. Is the weapon and operator supervised anti-material system to defend remotely piloted or autonomous vehicles or vessels? Yes. Proceed with formal development or No. Does the weapon only apply non-lethal, non-kinetic force against material targets? Yes. No. Review the weapon system in accordance with Section 4 of DoD 3000.9. Before formal development, the reviewers are the USDP, USDRNE, VCJCS, supported by Autonomous Weapon Systems Working Group. Before fielding, the reviewers are the USDP, USD-A&S, VCJCS, supported by the Autonomous Weapon Systems Working Group. Did the review process result in approval to develop or field the system? No, do not develop or field the system. Yes, proceed with formal development or fielding in accordance with applicable DoD acquisition. Does this benefit Israel? Yes. Proceed with formal. No, do not develop. Does this benefit the United States? Yes. Do not develop or field the system. Only Israel can be benefited. Sorry, had to add that in there. Section 5, Autonomous Weapon System Working Group. Oh, here we go. The Autonomous Weapon System Working Group will support the USDP, the USDRNE, and the VCJCS in considering the full range of relevant DoD interests during the review of autonomous weapon systems before formal development. Support the USDP and USD-A&S and the VCJCS in considering the full range of relevant DoD interests during the review of autonomous weapon systems before fielding. When requested by appropriate representatives of the Secretaries of the Military Departments, the Commander, USSOCOM, or when applicable, a Director of the Defense Agency or DoD field activity, advise whether a given weapon system requires senior level approval in accordance with this directive, help identify and advise on addressing potential issues presented by a given weapon system during a potential senior level review in accordance with this directive. 5.2 Membership. In addition to representatives of the USDP, the Autonomous Weapon System Working Group will consist of representatives of each of the following officials listed below. All members of the working group will be full-time federal government employees, permanent part-time federal government employees, or service members on active duty. So there could be non-military involved in this as part of the working group. I mean, I guess so. You have private contractors, you got a bunch of colleges that are fed money by the CIA and the NSA, etc., and the weapons organizations. That's where the main research and development is done, is in colleges. So the parent organizations for the representatives will be responsible for any expenses to include travel-related expenses associated with participation in the working group. USD-A&S, USD-RNE, GCDOD, CDAO, DOT&E, CJCS representatives from Director for Strategy, Plans, Policy, Joint Staff. 2. Director, Command Control, Communications and Computers, Cyber Chief, Information, Joint Staff J6, Director for Force Structure, Resources and Assessment, Joint Staff J8, Legal Counsel to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now we have glossary. So 3 pages of the acronyms. AI, Artificial Intelligence, CJCS, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, CDAO, Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer, DoD, Directive, DoDI, DoD Instruction, DOT&E, Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, GCDOD, General Counsel of the Department of Defense, IOT&E, Initial Operational Test and Evaluation, ROE, rules of engagement. TNE, test and evaluation. TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. USD, ANS, Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. USDP. USD, RNE, Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. USSOCOM, United States Special Operations Command. VCJCS, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. V&V, verification and validation. Definitions. Unless otherwise noted, these terms and their definitions are for the purpose of this directive. Autonomous weapon system. A weapon system that, once activated, can select and engage targets without further intervention by an operator. I think Ron Popeil said it and forget it. This includes, but is not limited to, operator-supervised autonomous weapon systems that are designed to allow operators to override operation of the weapon system, but can select and engage targets without further operator input after activation. Failure. An actual or perceived degradation or loss of intended functionality or inability of the system to perform as intended or designed. Failure can result from a number of causes, including but not limited to human error, faulty human-machine interaction, malfunctions, communications degradation, software coding errors, enemy cyber attacks, or infiltration into the industrial supply chain, jamming, spoofing, decoys, other enemy countermeasures or actions, or unanticipated situations on the battlefield. For the purposes of this issuance, minimizing the probability and consequences of failure means reducing the probability and consequences of unintended engagements to acceptable levels while meeting mission objectives, and does not mean achieving the lowest possible level of risk by never engaging targets. Does not mean achieving the lowest possible level of risk by never engaging targets. So yeah, it's already built into the system to allow. Fielding, making a weapon system available for or placing it into operational use rather than testing exercises or experiments, regardless of the acquisition approach employed for the weapon system, including major defense acquisitions programs, middle-tier acquisitions, or prototyping efforts such as joint concept technology demonstrations, i.e., we don't care where it comes from, just as long as we can kick some ass. Formal development begins at milestone B, as described in paragraph 3.10 of DODI 5000.85 in the case of major defense acquisition programs. For cases other than major defense acquisition programs, begins after the preliminary design review that correlates with the end of the technology maturation and risk reduction phase. Material. Defined in the DoD Dictionary of Military and Associated Terms. Operator-supervised autonomous weapon system. An autonomous weapon system that is designed to provide operators with the ability to intervene and terminate engagements, including in the event of a weapon system failure before unacceptable levels of damage occur. Wow. Operating state. A variable or vector reflecting the status of the system. Operator, a person who operates a platform or weapon system. Remotely operated platform, an air, land, surface, subsurface, or space platform that is actively controlled by an operator who is not physically on the platform, i.e. Ender's Game. Control the system using a joystick and a keyboard, or a mouse, or now your brain. Synthetic telepathy. Robust AI, defined in the DoD Responsible Artificial Intelligence Strategy and Implementation Pathway. Semi-autonomous weapon system. A weapon system that, once activated, is intended to only engage individual targets or specific target groups that have been selected by an operator. This includes weapon systems that employ autonomy for engagement-related functions, including but not limited to acquiring, tracking, and identifying potential targets, queuing potential targets to operators, prioritizing selected targets, timing of when to fire, or providing terminal guidance to home in on selected targets, provided that operator control is retained over the decision to select individual targets and specific target groups for engagement. Fire and forget. Set it and
I'll
forget.
slide it back and set it and forget it. That's if you followed all the instructional material.
Or lock on after launch homing munitions that rely on TTPs to maximize the probability that only targets within the seeker's acquisition basket when the seeker activates are those individual targets or specific target groups that have been selected by an operator. So, what's going on in New Jersey right now with the drones? That's what's going on. Acquiring, tracking, identifying potential targets, queuing potential targets to operators, prioritizing selected targets, timing. Now, they're not firing, that I'm aware of, and providing terminal guidance to home in on selected targets. Specific target group. A discrete group of potential targets, such as a particular flight of enemy aircraft, a particular formation of enemy tanks, or a particular flotilla of enemy vessels. A general class of targets or a specific type of target, such as a particular model of tank or aircraft, does not constitute a specific target group. State transition matrix. Oh, I'm glad it's in there. I was curious what this was. A matrix that characterizes the ability of a system to transition from one operating state to another. State transition matrix. A matrix that characterizes the ability of a system to transition from one operating state to another. So fire, not fire, I guess. Interesting. Target selection. The identification of an individual target or a specific group of targets for engagement. Unintended engagement. The use of force against persons or objects that commanders or operators did not intend to be targets of the U.S. military operations, including unacceptable levels of collateral damage beyond those consistent with the law of war, ROE, and commander's intent. Weapon system. Defined in the DoD Dictionary of Military and Associated Terms. Weapon system safety rules. Guidance for personnel issued by competent authority focused on addressing weapon safety issues and concerns that present significant mishap risk and is applied with a view towards ensuring freedom from conditions that can cause occupational illness, unintended death or injury, unintended damage to or loss of equipment or property, or unintended damage to the environment. Here's the references. DoD Directive 1322.18, Military Training, October 3rd, 2019. DoD Directive 2311.01, DoD Law of War Program, July 2nd, 2020. DoD Directive 3000.03, DoD Executive Agent for Non-Lethal Weapons, NLW, and Non-Lethal Weapons Policy, April 25th, 2013. DoD Directive 5000.01, the Defense Acquisition System, September 9th, 2020, as amended. DoD Directive 511.21, Arms Transfer and Technology Release Senior Steering Group and Technology Security and Foreign Disclosure Office, October 14, 2014, as amended. DoD Directive 5145.01, General Counsel of the Department of Defense, December 2, 2013, as amended. DoD Instruction 5000.83, Technology and Program Protection to Maintain Technological Advantage, July 20, 2020, as amended. DoD Instruction 5000.85, Major Capability Acquisition, August 6, 2020, as amended. DoD Instruction 5000.89, Test and Evaluation, November 19, 2020. DoD Instruction 8500.01, Cybersecurity, March 14, 2014, as amended. DoD Responsible AI Working Council. DoD Responsible Artificial Intelligence Strategy and Implementation Pathway, June 21, 2022. Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System Manual. Manual for the Operation of the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, August 31st, 2018. Military Standard 882E, Department of Defense Standard Practice System Safety, May 11, 2012. Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, DoD Dictionary of Military and Associated Terms, current edition. Secretary of Defense Memorandum, Artificial Intelligence Ethical Principles for the Department of Defense, February 21st, 2020. So there we go. That's DoD Directive 3000.09. If that does not send a shiver up your spine and how much abuse has been perpetrated and will continually be perpetrated from here on out, using cybersecurity, using electronic warfare, artificial intelligence weapons platforms, and these autonomous and semi-autonomous. How do we fight this? What are our options? What do we do? What happens when we are all biocensored and it's inside of us, that they can track, target, and ID us, Zypher and Pogo us? So whatever you do, just don't take any more injections. Do not take any more injections unless it's what you want. You want to become a node on the system, even more so than we already are, and to be even more hackable, and to be part of the dupes being sold on precision AI healthcare. All right, well, that's enough. Until next time.
Thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass